Welcome to the Multifamily Mind Podcast. In today's episode, we do a multifamily marketing deep dive for operators with the multifamily marketing unicorn and founder of INAT Brand Solutions, Paul McClain. You'll learn how on-site teams can support corporate marketing and vice versa, how you can train your team members to be marketers, and Paul's polls for big wins he's seen in multifamily marketing. Let's jump in. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Multifamily Mind. My name is Steve Wunsch. I'm your host, and joining me today, the infamous Paul McClain. Say hey, Paul.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. It's Friday, and I'm spending it with you, so I don't think I could be better.
You probably need to get out a little more. Hey, I'm so glad you're here. And, you know, I want to jump into what you're doing in the space, but I do want to take a split second because you kind of went from, you know, working at an operator to jumping onto the supplier side and actually starting your own consulting firm called INAT. And I want you to kind of tell the story about the name and what's behind all that.
Yeah, well, awesome. I'm glad to be here. And yeah, INAT was a brainchild I had many years ago. In 2009, my mom was sick with cancer, and I promised her before she passed that if I ever opened the business I wanted to open, I would name it after her. Her name is Tana, Tania. So I just added an extra I for internet because that's the type of marketing I'm experienced in, and it was born. So it's very fitting, and actually on the screen, her name is sitting right there, oddly enough, in my view anyway. So super cool.
That's awesome. What a great tribute to her. I bet you she's real proud of you. So let's kind of jump into, you know, what you're doing in our space. You are a multifamily marketing consultant, and you work on behalf of owner operators who maybe don't have a marketing person on their team, or maybe there's a gap right now before a position is filled. So talk a little bit about what you do and how you go about assessing your clients' needs when you're working with them.
Yeah, I mean, that setup is really perfect, actually. I'm kind of living in both of those spaces. So consider me kind of a fractional director of marketing, you know, in the case of owner operators that don't have a marketing department that needs some help kind of realigning their marketing stack. Most recently, I jumped into a partnership where I'm helping facilitate the hire of a new director of marketing. So that's been kind of a cool experience as well. You know, when I think about the needs of a property, I'm always doing digital research way before I even approach a client. Or if someone comes to me, I generally do research before I engage with them, so I kind of know what I'm already walking into. It's always interesting to be prepared and kind of see what I see, and then hear from the client's perspective kind of where they feel like I would fit in their strategy. So kind of a cool experience to get in there right away and walk in with a bit of an opinion.
Love it. I wonder, can you share, I mean, I don't want you to give away your trade secrets, but could you maybe share like just a little bit of what you're looking at? I think if, you know, there's any corporate marketing folks that are listening to this podcast today, just giving them some idea on some of the things that you're looking for that might not have hit their radar yet. And maybe they'll be able to take some good nuggets away from that. Yeah.
I mean, the first thing I do is Google the subject community that I'm looking at. I think you can always tell a lot about what comes back on a Google search. It also allows me to really understand where they're at, right? I think so many times we don't really remember that our information is everywhere on the internet. And if we don't know what's out there and where it's at, somebody else is telling our story for us, right? So the first thing I do is Google. I look at all of the listings, figure out if they're live or if they aren't. If the listing generally isn't live, you're not going to see a ton of availability. The photos may not feel real fresh. So I always pay attention to the listing itself, right? And kind of do a health check, if you will, making sure that you have your updated pricing and availability, because that's super important. But if you don't have that, that's an indication that you might not be live on that site. Looking at reputation, you know, looking at Google, apartment ratings, apartments.com, really taking it step by step to really ensure I understand where we're starting and where maybe we need to go based on all of those things.
Okay. So less like you're a prospect looking and more like I want to make sure that everywhere a marketing person would need to check, I'm checking first to see where there might be some disparity there, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you think about multifamily marketers, right, our charge is a bit different than operators in that we see things differently. So operators may not even know that something is broken online, but a multifamily marketer does. And so that's why it's super critical to be in the business of these properties online all the time, because tracking can break at any time. A UTM can go south. So that's really what I like to do, is really come to the table with my subject matter expertise, because a lot of times the operators just don't know what to look for.
Sure. Yeah. And I hear you when it comes to things can break at any time, because that's happened quite a bit in my experience. So you're checking Google, all the links that come up with regard to that property that show up on that initial Google search. You're probably checking all the ILS places too, apartments.com, and all those good places. What do you do when it comes to, like, as you're doing this, I'm sure you're also thinking about like strengths and weaknesses in terms of their digital presence. What does that kind of look like from your perspective?
Customer experience really falls in exactly what you just said, right? If the links are they flow correctly, if the story makes sense. I'll give you an example. A button on a web page on the homepage that is talking about the floor plans and the text copy above it, but then goes to the gallery. That doesn't make sense. That's a broken experience for the prospect. And so even getting down and dirty and kind of taking the websites for a test drive, submitting a lead, pretending I'm a prospect, just to kind of see from a people perspective, kind of what I might find as I'm digging into the digital.
Sure. I love that, because what you end up doing then is you're coming to a conversation with a potential client saying, hey, I know your business. I've looked at things. I've looked at your Google. I've looked at your website. I've shopped the properties from a digital perspective. These are some of the things that I've seen, and I have a solution for all of these, we'll call them opportunities perhaps, that I've identified. And I think for a lot of supplier partners and for a lot of folks who may be in a consulting gig like you are, it's really important to remember you don't want to just come to a conversation with a pitch. You want to come to a conversation saying, hey, I've identified some things that could be potential pain points for you. First, I want to confirm that they are. And that'll happen during that initial conversation. And then you're able to say, well, I've got some solutions for you, and here's what I'd like to present.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'd add to that to say that some of our clients that have a portfolio, some of these deficiencies are across the board. And so what I find on one may very well be a problem on the other. And that allows me an opportunity to even elevate the conversation to say, hey, let's dig into this part of your stack. And what are you doing here? I'm rolling out some AI pieces for both of my clients right now. And it's interesting to see the value that the clients see in this and just how intricate the setups are. And I think that if you don't have the right person in the right spot kind of leading that change, it can get very clunky very quickly. So
sure. And that's a space that's new for us as an industry. It's, something that people are trying out now and feeling a lot more comfortable with. But to your point, to have, someone who's maybe a director of marketing that might not have had the exposure to the backside of how AI functions and what all the workflows are, you've got that eye to look that from that perspective, which I think is a real plus for you. Yes. You said one thing. You said, typically if I find an issue in a property and they've got a portfolio, it might be pervasive throughout the portfolio. It could also be that they think everything's cool because this one property that they spend most of their time looking at could be their gem in their crown, so to speak. Everything's fine with that, but what about the rest of the portfolio? So I think it's a good reminder to our listeners to, every so often, maybe a cadence of every quarter at least, or if not monthly, step back
From a corporate marketing perspective, I think we need to have our eyes on this stuff quarterly. I would love to see more on-site team members taking ownership of digital audits from a monthly perspective. Again, those tracking numbers can break. I'll give you an example of something I see. A lot of our listings, the websites use vanity numbers in front of our tracking information. And sometimes the on-site teams don't know that. And so they panic when the website number isn't correct in their mind, right? Isn't correct. Right. Mm-hmm. And they come to us. But if we did a better job of proactively communicating what they could expect, as far as that's concerned, it would make a big difference in the collaboration and the partnership.
That's great. And that's a nice segue because, one of my next questions to you is like, what are some recommendations that you make in addition to this one to really help the corporate marketing team and the property teams become more of a, cohesive, collaborative cohort together, and some things that you could recommend for both sides of the table. So maybe we'll start with what are some things that the corporate support marketing team can do to better equip the property. And one of those things would be, to your point, communicating the strategy and some of those nuances like vanity numbers and things that might look different to a leasing consultant.
Yeah, I think starting there is a great opportunity. I actually posted on LinkedIn the other day about working digital marketing theory into on-site onboarding training. I think that's a really great way for corporate marketing to have a voice, to say, this is how we want you to do it. This is how we want you to understand it. So the messaging is controlled, but we also don't put the on-site teams in a position where we don't trust them to elevate their experience within the organization, right? And I think we could have a multifamily marketing superstar on site. I mean, I started as a leasing agent, and if I wouldn't have been given the opportunity to prove myself and my marketing chops, I wouldn't be with you right now. So I think that siloing corporate marketing and the on-site teams when you're talking about training and understanding does more harm than good. And this is just my opinion, right? Organizations will feel differently. From an on-site perspective, I think asking those questions is critical. Don't put your head in the sand. If you see a problem on the website, simply ask the question. It provides the dialogue. It opens that up. And it inserts that person into the situation, right? It gives that collaboration and really that visibility for the on-site teams to really show the regional, who should be copied on that email, whoever that looks like, right? That chain of command, that they're actually interested in furthering the success of the community, right?
Sure,
Leasing agents are the front line. We depend on them to lease these multi-million-dollar assets, but we're afraid to give them some digital marketing theory and accept that maybe they can actually understand that too. We have to be better about trusting them.
Yeah. I love your approach to onboarding and training because that was my space for 27 years. Never in a leasing class did I ever talk about marketing and how it's done, how it impacts the leasing process, how a leasing consultant can have a hand in helping marketing efforts be more successful. So I think to our listeners, whether you're the training person at your company or the marketer, that's a great opportunity to really help people level up their knowledge. And to your point, Paul, you might have there's a lot of folks that are in school right now working as leasing agents, and some of them are, targeting a marketing degree for their end goal. And what better way to highlight, and encourage that growth within the organization and within multifamily in general, but to give them some of those, good marketing chops and a good foundational knowledge base of internet marketing. That's a great idea.
It came to me yesterday, Steve. It was over morning coffee, which usually the best ideas come to me. So who knows? I would say that if anyone starts doing that, I would love to learn more about it, right? I think a lot of my ideas come from my own brain, and I think because I'm not attached to an organization, a lot of them may fall flat. But if anyone picks that one up, I would really love to hear how it goes. So,
well, I don't think it could do. I don't think it could do anything but benefit both the organization and that person in their growth with the company. So, and it's funny. I'll give a little secret away. This is our second attempt at this conversation.
Yes.
And I'm always saying everything happens for a reason. And we did not have this conversation on our first round. And I think that this is a really great takeaway for our folks listening. Let's kind of stay in this mode. So we kind of talked a little bit about what corporate could do differently from the marketing perspective. What can the properties do differently to be better prepared for maybe it's a visit with someone like you who's a consultant or a fractional market CMO who's sort of filling a gap until somebody gets hired on the team. What can the properties do better that you've seen as kind of some trends in your working with your clients?
First of all, I'll say that being on site, right, we see the same thing every day. And so what I would say is, first of all, educate the teams on making the property show ready, make sure your light bulbs are on, make sure that the pillows are fluffed. All of that is super important. For someone like me coming in and looking at the property, all of that matters to me. And sometimes I think we forget the details because we see it so much, right?
Yeah.
And so from my perspective, the roach in the bathtub or the toilet seat up instead of down or whatever the case may be, those are the things I think that we may not think make a big difference, but in my view, it's clutter. It feels like a lot. It shows you're not cleaning. It shows your lack of attention to detail. So I think when an on-site team is preparing to kind of host that type of a visit, really think about touring like maybe a celebrity or your favorite sports star, or, imagine Taylor Swift is going to live at your property and you have to sell the most beautiful apartment, and think through the lens of what you would expect, right? If you're going into an apartment and you'd be weirded out by a dirty bathtub, then you shouldn't show a dirty bathtub.
And that's a great activity or exercise that the whole team, the service team, could be involved in that kind of an exercise, as well as the leasing team. And it takes, both of those sides of the house really collaborating together. The make ready has to be done to a perfect standard in order for the leasing team to be able to sell it and show it. So I love that.
Can we bring back the sparkle bucket, please? The sparkle bucket.
Did it ever go away? I don't think it ever left.
If it hasn't left, great. But I will just say, hopefully the sparkle bucket is still a thing, because I love to go sparkle.
So for you young whippersnappers out there that are new to the industry from these two old farts who are sitting here talking, Paul, what is a sparkle bucket?
Oh, it's just a bucket you keep under the kitchen sink that has a roll of paper towel, some Windex, maybe some bleach, an extra air freshener if you have an air wick in the apartment. You have to spruce it up. It has to look beautiful when somebody walks in. It has to look good. It has to smell good. And if you have it there, you can do it yourself. Oh my God, the times I would clean an apartment for a make ready.
Oh yeah, for 100%. I've plunged and scrubbed enough toilets in my day to lease apartments for sure.
Yeah,
we had extra light bulbs in ours just in case a light bulb was out. Both the vanity lights that might be different than the lights in say the kitchen or elsewhere in the apartment. So just a little bucket full of stuff that could spruce up if you need it. Yeah. And, I was leasing and did that. I was a manager and did that. And I love the idea, too, of like just kind of driving through the property. When I lived on site, to your point, I saw it every day. I lived in it every day. And I would every once in a while just get in my car and drive out and come back in like I was a customer. And even, a block either side of the front entrance, making sure there's no trash that's blown in, because that talks about our neighborhood. It may not be our responsibility, but it does have an impact on people's first impressions. Yes. And then I drive the community. And so if you're a regional manager or if you're a corporate support person who is making a visit to the property, always make sure you do that drive through, not to find error or to find things wrong, but just to help people see the things, to your point, Paul, that they may not see because they are looking at it every day.
Yeah. And I would go one step further to say, a lot of times I'll disappear by myself on the property and walk behind buildings, right? So I'll kind of live on property as a resident to make sure that there's not trash stuck in a corner. You don't have an overfull, doggy waste station. Yeah. A lot of those things get missed in the corners of the communities. And so I always make it an attempt to get to every building to make sure I see it.
Yeah. cobwebs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You did allude in our earlier conversation to a really good example that will help people sort of really kind of come to brass tacks when it comes to how to prepare for a visit from someone like you. And it was that photo shoot analogy. Can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah. So I think,
do you remember what we talked about?
No. I'm thinking, I thought I did. And then when I went to go express myself, that's when you saw the second pause. What was it?
We talked about if a photo shoot was going to happen at your property, you would be sure that all the light bulbs in the leasing office were on, all the pillows had been fluffed, that the pool furniture was, so just that idea around what would you do if, you were going to be on the cover of Apartment Home Living magazine, you'd be ready. And you should do that every day. You should do that every day because the most important person is coming to see you, and that's your customer.
A lot of times when you work with photographers, they may or may not come with a prep sheet, right? To show you how to do those things. So I would say two things. If you don't have a prep sheet, thinking through that lens of what you just said about being on the cover of a magazine is a simple and really quick, easy way to understand that. But if you do get a prep sheet, keep that for your records and utilize that across the board, especially if you're utilizing the same photographer. There would be no reason not to share that information across your portfolio to make sure each time that happens, you have the same set of standards, right? I think consistency is critical. And I had an owner once back in my third-party days when I worked for Capstone that always said they wanted someone to walk into property A and be able to go to property B and know that it's them. So it was branded differently, but the level of service, the type of collateral, the look and feel, it was all the same, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you an opportunity to kind of brand your style.
That's how you build a brand, for sure. And that's it's also a good thing to think about when it comes to, you should be inviting a photographer to update your pictures if they haven't been updated in 3 years, because things look different than they did in photos. People can tell if it's an older photo and if it's not been, updated anytime recently. What kind of recommendation do you make in terms of keeping your collateral updated with updated pictures and things?
Well, I am very much internally very organized. And so my clients all have a spreadsheet, which basically includes, the property list, what they're advertising, the amounts, social logins, Google Business Profile logins, media shoot availability. All of that stuff is going to live in that one document. I think it's really important when you're talking about photo shoots, you're talking about these things, it's the customer experience, right? If you haven't updated photos in 5 years, let's say, and the pool's been resurfaced, the model's been repainted, if they walk in and see something different, it kind of breeds mistrust. And that's really the last thing these days that we need to do. So I think
go ahead. I was just going to say it's like a dating app when you it's that, what do they call it, clickbait or whatever it is.
I don't know. I'm not on dating apps.
Okay, so anyway, when you click and the photo is amazing, and then you actually meet in person and they're like 300 pounds heavier, and catfish. That's it. There we go.
All right.
Hi, folks. I wanted to take a quick 30-second break so that I could say, I hope you're enjoying today's episode, which couldn't be brought to you without being superpowered by Sales Mail. I mean, really, we couldn't produce this content without them. Sales Mail is the easiest and best tool for sending personalized video via email, text, and CRM. So, if you really are enjoying today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you would visit salesmail.com so you can check out how our solutions might impact your business communications. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn as well. Okay, that's enough. Now back to the conversation. All right. So we talked a little bit about how the property team can sort of rally up to prepare to better partner with someone in a marketing role. Conversely, how do you think the corporate marketing or support folks could better support the property level teams? We did talk a little bit about that communication from corporate marketing to the site level. I think that that's one thing. Is there anything else you can think of that would be helpful in allowing the corporate support team to help maybe on-site teams understand why cost matters, or some of those conversations that maybe we're missing?
Two things here. Number one, I don't think we should keep secret how much things cost, to your point, right? If we're spending $4,500 on Google and display ads, geofencing, whatever that looks like, the teams need to understand the financial value of that and the risk that's involved if they don't get the attribution right. I think it's critical we give them the tools to succeed and really understand why we're asking them to really dig into where they're coming from, right? Google is the vehicle in which we get into on the internet to find our destination. Google is not an answer. Drive-by is not an answer. Unless you literally are in a neighborhood where you have so much foot traffic and so much drive-by traffic that it's applicable, right? But drive-by is not really a source, right? People don't just see us driving by.
They had to find something somewhere.
Right. They went online. They went to Google, right?
Yeah. Maybe they're driving and they're on their phone in the car,
Yeah. I mean, I was in Austin a couple weeks ago, and I just sat in the middle of a little area and Googled apartments and just figured out what came up. If I'm doing that, other people are doing that. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and to your point, like, we need to, as operators and as the corporate support team, provide opportunities for those folks that are boots on the ground, front line, to really learn financial accountability and, why these things matter. To your point, I think in one of our earlier conversations, you said, like, maybe we're given a month free and rent's, $1,800 a month, and we're spending $2,500 a month for this specific package on this ILS or that ILS, and all those costs that now I understand as a leasing consultant why it matters for me to say, how did you hear about us? And if I don't have that why behind the what, I'm likely to just put walk-in or Google, Yeah.
Well, and I think to your point, right? If we gave clear direction, it would be so much easier. And I'll bring this back to my idea I gave earlier. If we teach those itty bitty details ahead of time, it's going to reinforce in the long term better success in what you're trying to get, right?
100%.
The quick changes, the quick strategy shifts, asking someone to do something one way for 6 months and then another way. You have to understand the audience you're speaking to. The other thing I would say about corporate marketing and how they can support the on-site teams is with follow-up, right? If the on-site team is coming to you to say, hey, I have a problem with my website, you can fix it, but hey, so-and-so, I took care of X, Y, and Z. This is completed, right? I think too many times we get so busy at corporate, and I'm not saying that we're to blame, the corporate marketers are to blame, but we have to follow up, right? If we want their buy-in to help us, we need to treat them with that same respect and make sure they feel like we're supporting them. It's a two-way street, and we're the leaders in that. So we should be leading by example and driving the results we want by training them how to do it the correct way.
Yeah. And I know in our listening audience,
whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, I know in our audience, there are several folks who are part of the learning team at a couple of different organizations, and they're looking to revamp their leasing training and their sales training. And I think, this is great stuff to share. I remember people in organizations that I worked at in the past who would, as a marketer, would, to your conversation about, hey, I fixed X, Y, and Z, and let's get in there and let me kind of show you what I did, because maybe the next time we need to do this, you can do it. If there's the ability to offer permissions and different things, I know everybody has a different structure to how they allow people to, who has powers and who has no power. But, again, the idea of growing those skills, all you want to do is pour into people knowledge, give them the knowledge they need to understand why and how it's done and how they matter in the process. And that grows their skill set. It helps them to develop into a very well-desired member of the organization and potentially sets them up for some future promotion or success elsewhere,
I'll I'll give you this. When I was with Capstone, I regularly had our managers get on trainings with our website providers. It's simple, just to learn how to update your own special, right?
Yep.
I was doing business development at the time. I was doing, pitches, all of that type of thing. These one man marketing departments, these superheroes basically, because they're doing everything. Yeah. If we can offload even just one of those things by proactively teaching them how to do it, it's a win across the board for everybody. Sure. Yeah, onsite doesn't have to wait on me. I don't have to spend 10 minutes just changing a special. It works out, but we're possessive. I love it. Marketers are possessive. We want to hold the keys to everything. and organizations sometimes still seem to silo off, and things are done in a silo, and that, we've got to break through that mentality if we really want to grow our organizations and help our people to develop. So, great. So let's shift gears. So we've talked a little bit about, this relationship between, corporate marketing, on-site teams, what they can do to better partner together. But you've been in this space a while. You were at Capstone in a leadership role for marketing. You've got your own consultancy now. Can you share maybe some examples of communities that you've worked with that are really like hitting it out of the ballpark in terms of their marketing or messaging? You may not have to call them out specifically by name, but maybe what the strategy was and why it was so successful. Yeah, I immediately think of a 55 plus asset I was working on in the Dallas area a couple years ago.
Okay.
The owners were super involved, with the messaging, to the look, to the feel. We took intention to create that brand, and it was like smooth like butter. Like, I know branding people out there, when they see it, and it's the perfect blend of the colors, the messaging. It was light, it was airy. I remember that being a win across the board. The client was super happy. We were super happy with it. We did banners, we did the folders, we did the cards, we did stationery, we did maintenance leave behinds, we did review cards, and it was such a cohesive brand package that once it made it online, right, we launched our paid search about 150 days prior to first units, layered in that social piece and that display piece once we had some of those assets from the units we had already acquired. And once we mixed that with the branding, leasing really picked up because people they get attached to the brand if you activate it correctly. And once you have the tangible, the goods, the models to show them, when you combine the two, it just hits differently. So I remember that being super, super fantastic. And I felt really, really good about that when it's good, it's really good.
And what made it good was this kind of cohesiveness between ownership, and property management, because obviously it was a third party management deal. Yep. But that owner is entrusting you guys to do the right thing on their behalf. And I think, again, that's a great thing to share with someone who's new to their role in leasing or service is, we don't own this property. And, we write checks from somebody else's checkbook, and here's all the things that we can do to really make sure that we are a good steward of what's been given to us and that we become that trusted advisor that they want to do more business with us. And I think, you and I have that mindset of, it's always about potential future business with someone.
Yes.
And, leasing people and service team members, you guys 100% have an influence on whether or not a new management contract is signed or if the owners are going to go looking for somebody else because we're not cutting the mustard. And so, again, it's just that opportunity to educate the listener who may be new to their role. You've got a lot of impact in the everyday business as well as the future of your company too. So that's a great thing to think about. What about the opposite side? So that was a really great experience. You had this really cohesive, wonderful, buttery moment with the owners there, and that launch was successful. Have you had anything that sort of was an instance where maybe we missed the mark or had a blurble?
A flop.
A flop?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been several. what I'll say about that is that I think not being organized and not understanding the client's goals when you're going into like a rebrand. I'll give you an example. We, take over deals all the time in third party, right?
Yeah.
So having the conversation with that client to say, okay, let's look at your reputation. What's the timeline for your renovations? What's your long-term goals with this property, right? Because if they're going to turn and burn it, just like the last guy did, then spending thousands of dollars on a branding package may not be the best use of their operational funds, right? But if it's a long-term hold, a 5-year plan, then investing in the strategy is a good idea. I think the miss that we're talking about here happens when you don't figure that piece out first. You go chasing a brand and you show it to the client. They look confused. What is this? This doesn't feel right. They'll give you the feedback, and then your branding partner is frustrated because you didn't really do your due diligence on the back end to make sure it was going to be a good experience. I think, and this is going to sidetrack just a bit, but it is what it is. I think that too often we forget that we have to be really good partners to our vendors, right? I think I've seen that a lot more now on my side, because while I'm still interfacing on the owner operator's behalf with our supplier partners, I'm also a supplier partner. And so I've seen how the operators communicate with me as a supplier now. And I say that out loud to just remind everyone who's listening, like, it's two to tango. So, it's important to make sure you show up to anything, a branding exercise, a review call, any of that, you need to show up prepared.
Yep. Yeah. And you can't assume, I think a pervasive theme that I've taken away from this conversation is, the idea of really preparing. If you're an individual contributor or you're running your own show in a marketing role, really doing your due diligence up front before you approach a potential client. You've identified some pain points, you've identified some missed opportunities, and you've got some solutions to meet those. And then to your point, just recently in your last, kind of diatribe was, it's all about understanding what the owner wants, and when things change and we think we know what they want, we can't ever go on assumption, and you would never prepare a playbook and a lookbook and all these things without really digging in and asking some good questions around, who's our demographic going to be? What kind of personas do we need to market to? What kind of look are you, what's your goal in the end? Do we want to turn this property around so that you can sell it? Do you want to turn this property around so that we can reinvent the demographic that lives here and create a new value add in this marketplace? So, some good conversations around just really doing your work up front and participating, being an active participant. If you're a manager or a leasing manager or somebody on site, your input and involvement is just as important as somebody from the corporate marketing or support team. So I love that.
All of that.
Yeah. So, I think you've given some pretty great insights. We've talked about some actionable things that both sides the corporate support team and the on-site team can sort of up their ante and show up differently to be a better partner with one another. I was hoping maybe that you could just share with our listeners a little bit about INAT and some of the services that you offer, and kind of give them an idea of how they can work with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I kind of show up a bit different. So we talked earlier about showing up and having some sort of a service. And I thought to myself, that's kind of the opposite of what I do, right? So I don't show up with a price list, if you will. I can't possibly just come to you and say, hey, Steve, I know you're an owner. Here's everything I do, right? That shows you that I'm not even really caring what you need. And so I show up a bit different in that I'm going to ask you to walk with me. So a potential client, we get on the phone, I'll do my digital audit and we'll dive in. I'll give you an example. So I'm working on a marketing stack right now. What I found was some overuse on an ILS, underutilizing a paid search strategy and really not much focus on organic SEO. So when I walk into a situation like that, I'm juggling a couple different things, right? Your supplier relations, that partnership, the understanding of the strategy, and just jumping right in, right? So I think from that angle, that's one thing. I had a client right when I launched that was just purely, an advisory piece, right? They were looking to kind of refine their messaging on what they were selling, and I come from the owner operator side, and so I have a unique purview and a unique view to the marketing piece along with my expertise. So that was kind of a fun one. And really, I guess the third thing that I'm really focused on right now is just kind of optimizing. I have a client who I've been working with for almost a year now. And we've done some really amazing things with their stack, brought, costs down. We've refined what they've done. They were heavy on the paid search, not really on the ILS. So there was an exposure problem for them. And we tested some ILSs, figured out what worked and what didn't. And it really is humming like a well-oiled machine now. So I can really act as a consultant on a high-level branding piece or a rebrand, or I can dig in and get in the weeds with the client and kind of walk them through that step. I think a lot of times people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what they need until you show them. Right. And the cool thing about what I get to do is I get to find the problems, but also give them the solution in the same sentence. And that's the way to do it, right? You have you identify a problem, but if you give them a solution, it just keeps moving. So that was a really long-winded answer. Super sorry if that wasn't very clear and concise.
No, it wasn't long-winded. It was thoughtful. You didn't just blurt out an answer. So you work, I know you're based in San Antonio now, but you will work with clients all over the country, correct?
Yep. I have a client in Atlanta right now. I've worked with clients in Memphis, Texas. I have experience in the Florida markets. So there's a lot of... Go ahead.
You're getting ready to make a move. Where are you moving to?
We are going into the Midwest market. So Chicago is going to end up being my home base here. And so we'll be moving services up into the Midwest. So really excited to expand up there because I think, if I remember it correctly, I'm from the Midwest and we don't have a ton of Texas style communities up there. And if you're from Texas, you know what I mean when I say Texas style communities. And so I think the type of client that I can serve and I can make the most difference for is kind of living in that Midwest region. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're excited for you as well. All right. Well, I have one last question for you, my friend. And we use a word here at Multifamily Mind, and we use the word audacious. We want people to be audacious in how they, create experiences for customers. Audacious meaning fearlessly brave, almost reckless, like an audacious explorer who's going to, climb a mountain or spelunk a cave, no matter what people say. And I was wondering if you can think about, have you seen either as an operator or in your current role with INAT, have you ever seen an audacious marketing campaign that an operator's executed? And what made it so great and audacious in your opinion?
Man, I think there's so many. In fact, I see 3 in my head right now in various areas of San Antonio.
Okay.
Use of very good contrast, white and black, or navy and white. The other thing I'd say is that the messaging is very simple, like come in here or tour today. It's not a fancy, 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartment homes, resort style pool. These banners are on highways. We have 3 seconds to reach them. And so when you think about really those types of marketing campaigns that hit, it's that shorter messaging piece that just grabs your attention.
Well, and it's interesting that you would bring up an old school form of advertising. Mm-hmm. I've seen it in, my brother lives in Jacksonville, Texas. It's, East Texas, a small town, but there is billboard advertising all over the place. Yep. And I think, that's audacious because it's old school and we might not even have that on our radar as an option, but depending on your market and depending on the traffic in your market. Again, so this is all about, you got to really know your area, geography, traffic trends. I can see a billboard in my mind it's at a very busy intersection where you can't ever make it through the first turn light. You've got to wait through at least 2 before you'll get to turn. And there sits that billboard that says it's all about the audience, and I just think that's a really audacious thing to think about.
Mm-hmm. There was another property in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I was with Capstone for a long time, so I was still working there, and they were next to a McDonald's. And so what they did is they made 3 wood panels and put it on the opposite side of their perimeter fence. So as you were waiting in line to order, you could read their amenities. And so
that is smart.
Thinking outside the box is super critical. I would say one more thing about direct mailers. You said old school. Uh-huh. I know people don't really think direct mailers are a thing anymore, but in my marketing stack, in my plans, I use them because you couple them with a good geofencing campaign. You're getting a digital hit, and then you have that tangible in the hands
organic
piece. It just, the experience is better. It's a more cohesive story you're telling about your community. Yeah.
Well, and you're not limiting yourself to one type of buyer.
Right.
Sure, there's a lot of people that buy online and do their, they do their searching online, but there's a lot of people who don't.
Well, and I haven't gone paperless. No one come for me when I say that, but I haven't gone paperless. I like to have paper bills. I like to see what's coming in. So yeah. I would pick up that mailer if it came to my mailbox and I'd look at it. Throw the QR code on there and a good call to action. You're good to go.
I love it. Well, this has been so much fun. Yes. I think that this conversation, when we talked about having to re-record, this happened for a reason. You brought some really great things out in the conversation, some things that folks can easily take away and put to use. And again, I love the conversation about, teaching folks the basics of marketing and the financial piece of things, so that a leasing consultant understands, and even a service tech or a service manager understands, how they have a positive influence or negative influence in the financial success of a community. And working with a partner like you would be a dream come true. So we wish you all the best. So glad you were able to join us. Again, this has been the Multifamily Mind, super powered by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, or CRM. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great one, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Multifamily Mind podcast, brought to you by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, and CRM. To learn more, go to salesmail.com. And remember, always be audacious. Until next time, I'm Steve Wunsch. Have a great week.